Good evening, everyone. So in this live stream, we're going to run it as a Q&A again. So this isn't just going to be me talking at you. In theory, if you have a question and there's something that you really want to look at, then we can try and look at that. I do have a structure of things that I've already loaded up into a project in DaVinci, and I think they will help to demonstrate certain aspects of shoots where you're working with models and the things that I think are important with that. But like I say, we are running this as a Q&A, so if you want to ask something, just type it into the chat. If I miss it, because I'm going to be presenting obviously whilst I'm doing this, and once I get into something, as we saw in the last Q&A, I'll just talk for ages. So don't be afraid just to pop it into the chat again, because I might miss it if I don't scroll up. That all said, I've got loads of cool stuff loaded up in DaVinci, so what we're going to do is just cut into some of that. You already saw a little bit of our old showreel. That's the 2018 showreel that we put out, and we did loads of shoots all over the world working with lots of different models for lots of different reasons, and they each have their own story. So let's just cut to the computer, have a look through DaVinci, and whilst we're doing that, we can also get some of those questions in hopefully as well. Right. Now I have got the audio turned on the computer, so I'm going to just skim through here and turn that off on there. Now, to start off with, I thought we would travel back in time a little bit, because with all the shoots that we've been working on, always do this, always have to cut back to myself, with all the shoots that we've been working on, we've progressed, we have come from somewhere, and there are reasons why we learn certain things. So I thought we could look at some of the older shoots as well, because those might be more interesting, in fact, for some people, because they are more similar, perhaps, to the situation you're going to find yourself in. So that's where we're going to start, just here. So this first shoot is a shoot that we did for a company called Ill Mind, and they were a small fashion brand. We knew the guys involved with it, and we just wanted something a little bit more gritty, a little bit more urban feeling. So that is what we get to when we roll into this. I'm going to play it out. I'm not playing the audio with this, so we are just looking at the visuals just here so we can get a bit of a sense of what's going on. You can see it's very much about the environment just here. Hello to everyone who's tuning in. We've got Fishing Reel Pictures, we've got Aristonymus, Nath and Marcel. Good evening. I recognise some of those from last time. So we're just going to skim back through and have a look at that again. Now, particularly, what I want to talk about is this shot just here, where we're working with Gina Harrison. That's the name of the model. She is absolutely awesome, and she's got a really strong look, and she can really switch it on. So you don't necessarily have to make her do much, because she's already got it going on. Now, cutting back to this camera, so while I'm talking, it's not just the static screen. What is important with this is the attitude that we're trying to bring out. So for the brand, we needed it to feel a little bit challenging and sort of, she's looking right at you. She is confident. She doesn't necessarily approve of you. This is where we get into slightly weird territory where I'm going to say things like, you know, like wine smells of cut grass and grape seeds and all the rest of it. So this is my interpretation of what I was trying to get out of this. Whether it's what you think when you look at it, might not be. So she's obviously got a look. You know, she's pierced on this side, she's got a big piercing on this side, she's got a nose ring, and she's looking right at you, and she's being really confident, and she's kind of looking up at you. Now, the camera angle is important with this. So I am positioned on a monopod with this, and I was probably shooting on a Cinema 2.5K Blackmagic, looking down like this. So I had the camera right up here, looking down on her. We'd already done a few shots by this point, and I hadn't quite found the angle that I wanted. So we'd gone through a couple of the detail shots, and you see those later in the video, where you are seeing like little bits of the branding and the important elements that people are going to want to see if they're there to buy the clothing. That is critical that you are showing those things. But the personality of the model, for certain shoots, has got to carry the vibe of the piece as well. So that's why Gina is particularly good for this, because she does have that strong look. So what I said was, I want you to look right into the camera, just look into the camera, and then just look off like you're not interested. And I think that vibe that she gives it, it's a little bit like she's looking at you, she just goes, yeah. it doesn't feel like she's necessarily going to be friends with you. It doesn't feel like she's going to approve of you, and I think that works. That's what makes this strong. That and the whole location. So the location plays a part. We're not going to talk too much about lighting and that kind of thing in this one. What I will say is that none of this is actually lit. This is just finding a location and trying to work it. So we don't have any lighting on her at all. We've just got this dilapidated building and sunlight coming through, obviously in the background. I think it looks super cool. And then the grade on top of that is quite a hard grade, quite desaturated, but we do have some life in the skin as well. And it really focuses you in because it's like grey around. She's got this kind of shock of white hair, and then the black just framing her up crisply against everything else. And I think that for what the brand needed, that was cool. And just hand on the hip, moving, all of those strong movements, again, details. She's not particularly interested in you. And it's interesting for me when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what does the model think of the world that she's in when you film it? It's already getting a little bit weird. Maybe I should have another sip of coffee. Again, flare espresso. Whilst I'm doing that, actually, I'm just going to skim into the chat quickly. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, so Specialized Magic, absolutely no lighting at all. We did have some bouncers with us and some diffusion, and we used those on a couple of shots, but mostly for the strobes that we had. We had photography strobes, and it was only me and Spencer wrangling this. So he was on photography, I was filming, so we couldn't really do all that much. But going back to my point there, I think that when you look at what you're trying to get out of it, is the model in the world that she exists in, assuming that you're peering into it, does she know she's being filmed? It's an interesting question, and I say she. We do work with male models as well. It is just vastly weighted towards the female models, and you're going to see that as well. So when she looks at the camera, she's breaking the fourth. Like I'm looking at the camera now, I know there are people out there and I know they're watching me. Does the model, when you're doing the shoot and you're telling her what to do, does she ever look at the camera? If she looks at the camera, what is the relationship that she has with it? Is the camera there sort of watching her and she's being slightly flirtatious with it and a little bit coy, a little bit sort of beckoning? Okay. Is she looking at it like Gina is just here with a bit of disdain and like, you know, you can't come into my world, you can't exist in this place, I'm too cool, I'm too powerful, I'm too much for you to handle? That is the vibe that she is giving, in my opinion. So when you're thinking about the shoots that you do with models, depending on the brand, depending on the reason that you're doing the shoot, and that is something we're going to keep coming back to, what is the reason for the shoot? Here they kind of let us have free reign, and they were a little bit challenging as a brand. They wanted to be seen like this. They're streetwear, that's why they've got, you know, all of this going on with graffiti and the location. That all feeds into it. And in this shot just here again, she's just there, she's just standing within this frame, super cool. A lot of the graffiti was already there, interestingly. This was something that they put in specifically for the shoot. Obviously, it's got the branding and stuff, but the rest was just there. And I love how you can make the location work with this, because it's chaos. It's all the kind of things that when we talked about the corporate shoots in the last Q&A, we were saying, oh, you got to make sure there are no cables, and you've got to make sure that the lines are leading towards the person and that there isn't anything in their eye line and stuff. It's carnage here, but it's because it is so decimated that it actually works. Different kind of shoot, very different kind of shoot, but that is where we got to with this, and I enjoyed it. It's such a short piece, and we shot quite a lot, but in the end that kind of worked for it. That was the right fit. So that was back in 2015, I want to say, maybe something like that. Good few years ago now. If I was approaching this again, I might do it differently, but I don't think there's anything I would change. It would only be from the point of view of making the shoot run a bit smoother and being able to get things more quickly. So I might have a couple more crew there, and also if we didn't have all of the light coming in and things like that, maybe I'd look at bringing in lights for it, but then that's a bigger expense. But as it turns out, the location gave us everything we needed, the weather gave us everything we needed, we were lucky with it, so that's cool. Let's jump on to the next one. I'm going to cut back into this. So we've got a view of Da Vinci just here, and we're going to jump to this. Very different vibe with this shoot, because with this shoot we are much more beauty, much more fashion. Just going to play it out so you can see what's going on with these. Now, there's a couple of things that I really want to draw attention to here, and I think that you guys are going to dig how DIY the lighting for this was, because it was truly, truly ghetto. Okay, just let this play out. Wicked. Let's leave it just there. In fact, I'll leave it full screen. Now, polar opposite in terms of vibe and polar opposite in terms of the way that we were shooting it, you know, in a studio, literally, and controlling the light. And then we're running overcrank, you know, you will have noticed. This is all running at probably, I think it was 240 frames. This was way back when the FS700 had just come out and everyone was getting their super slow motion on. And this was all shot FS700 and, you know, whatever codec that was. It was a pretty thin codec by the standards of what we're working with now, where we've got like ProRes as a bare minimum on the Blackmagics and then Blackmagic Raw. This was like thin, paper thin, like Billboard Baggins says, you know, it's like it's butter spread thinly over too much bread. You had to work to get back your richness and your detail with that codec. But you know, I still like these shots, and I feel like they still stand up. They're not poor quality. Because of that, they've just had to be worked a lot harder. Now, there are a couple of things that really stand out for me within this. One is the lighting that we had to use. Now, I'm not too disappointed looking back at this old work, how the lighting looks and how the models actually work with this. For context here, this was lit with LED lights because when you work at those high frame rates, it's hard not to get flicker if you're using even keener flows can flicker. If you're using anything like tungsten, you're going to run into quite a lot of trouble. There are ways around it where you can like use very big tungsten, like 5K and up, doesn't flicker because it gets so hot. The filament in the bulb generates so much heat that in between the cycles, because the current alternating, it doesn't actually have time to dim. And that's what gives you the flicker. It's the element in a tungsten bulb dimming as the power cycles one way then the other with the alternating current. With an LED fixture, you don't get flickering. To light this then, we had a LED ring light, like had 300 LEDs, and I still can't remember what brand it was. And that was tiny, it's like this big. So it is basically the equivalent, and I'm looking around to see if I have one to hand, and I don't. I do. Probably the equivalent output-wise of one of these Lycos panels. So that's one light. And then the other light was, and I described these last time, I think, actually, they're sort of T8 tubes. They were 2 foot long. I had 3 of them, and they were just like replacements for household fixtures that you would get. So they were LEDs, and I had stripped out the internal circuit board and capacitors and all the rest of it, and then just wired it up to be able to plug a battery pack into it. And that meant that I could then have a fully transportable battery-powered solution, which kind of looked like keener flows, very ghetto. Only 2 foot long, but again, you stack 3 of them together. They have a fairly high output, probably about equivalent again to that ring light, to that Lycos panel just there. So on one side, we have that. On the other side, we've got the ring light. I was pushing them through a little bit of diffusion, I think, but it wasn't much because, again, I found very quickly that I hardly had enough light on the subject to get everything going at that frame rate, at that shutter speed. And I think I was boosting the ISO probably up to 1600 or maybe 3200, which is really, really pushing your luck on this. That is going to have been through a denoiser as well. Yeah, positive that I was using Neat Video to denoise all that footage. But it worked pretty well. Now, that's all lighting stuff. I promised I wouldn't get into too much lighting, so I apologise, but kind of had to give a bit of context and kind of give a little bit of encouragement, saying if you don't have all the big flashy equipment that I talk about sometimes, you can still like cobble stuff together and get a reasonable look out of it. Now the important thing here is what the model does, and we're going to cut back in and see what she's doing just here. So let's skim through, and it is this bit just here that I want to draw attention to. There. That is it. Watch her eyes, watch her eyeballs. Now none of the other models on the day could do this. I think I fell in love with her because she could do this. I want everyone to try this now. Look at something in the room, anything you want, and then try to, in one smooth movement, bring your eyes back to another point where you were looking before. So just... And the way that she does it, she is slowly turning her head, and then her eyes come in, and then her head finishes the movement, and then her eyes wide. The only instruction I was giving was, we're going to blast you with some air, and we didn't... I don't think we did this with a fan. I think we did this with a big bit of foam core. So I set the camera rolling. I'm lying down on the ground, just flicking like this. And then I said, just turn your head and just look into the camera and kind of try and look a bit sultry and just keep fixed on the lens. Now, the hard thing is that movement. It's incredibly difficult. And I hadn't really ever realized before this shoot how hard that can be to do, and how a lot of models won't have necessarily done it. So it seems obvious and it seems easy, but when it's in slow motion, you notice that a lot of people, when they're looking, they can't do a smooth movement. They fix on a couple of different things, and then their eyes become a little bit jerky. So they're moving from one point to another, and then they get to the camera. And sometimes they don't get perfectly to the camera. Sometimes they just look slightly over it and then back. So you see their eyes settle. And everything in slow motion is exaggerated. So when they do that, it really, really changes the vibe. And she was the only one that actually completely nailed it. And it just feels so much better than all of the others. Now that said, the other model who we just saw a moment ago with the big hair did nail what she was doing, but that was slightly different. We did try this, but it didn't work quite so well because of those reasons. So that's kind of cool just there. And the communication with the model is important because they need to know that they're looking down the barrel of the lens. They need to know where they're looking, and they need to know roughly what they're doing. Now we can go further into this as we begin to look at some of the other pieces, but body position, shoulder movement, head movement. Is the head down and the eyes up? Is the head up and the eyes down? All of these things start to impart a character to your model, and that is going to play into how the shoot goes. So is it, like we said before with Gina, meant to be like she's too powerful, she's too much? Is it a little bit intense like this, where she's looking straight into the lens in a kind of slightly longing way, and the slow motion exaggerates that sort of longing? It all plays into what your final video is going to look like. Let's cut to the next model and see how she dealt with it. Oh yeah, so I curtailed the movement just there, because the only thing that I didn't like was her hair catches and it doesn't quite release. So I cut that bit and I just put this bit in here. But even there, she's moving, her head's coming down, she's sort of looking at you but looking up a little bit now. Yeah, super cool, super cool. And other things, oh sorry, I'm caught on this now. What is your model's mouth doing when you do a shoot? What do you want her to be doing with her mouth? I keep saying her, or him, you know, whoever it is, but vast majority going to be her. So is it, so she's going to be sort of tight lip like this. Is she going to have her lips slightly apart? If she has her lips slightly apart, do they start apart or do they move apart? And it is going to change things in ways which you may not have had experience with. You may not have seen all of this in minute detail until you've done a couple of shoots. You probably don't really even think about that. You think about the bigger movements. But all of these small details help to give the piece a certain vibe. So here, the fact that her lips are slightly parted works really well. But if you say to someone, and you're working with an inexperienced model who hasn't really done this before, everything's going to be new to them, and they don't perhaps have so much control over their body, we are definitely going to touch on that again. But in this situation, she just did it naturally. I didn't even think about that, but she did it and it worked really well. But it's something which, as you get more into this, and you're going to need to be able to demonstrate it, you're going to need to be able to tell these inexperienced models what you want, but it might be too much. So temper what I'm saying with what the capabilities of your model are and how confident you feel explaining it or showing them it, because you could get yourself into quite a lot of trouble doing too much. So let's cut back in. Next model just had awesome hair. Her hair was crazy long, super, super glossy and shiny, and just like silk. It was intense. So with this again, it is just lit with the same lighting. I'm lying on the floor with a big piece of foam core, just flopping it backwards and forwards. And because she's basically looking at the lens all the time, I just said, don't worry about looking in any other directions or anything like that. I just want you looking straight down the barrel of the lens while we're doing this. Which was hard to do because you can imagine that hair is just flying absolutely everywhere while she's doing this. And because it's flying absolutely everywhere, she's going to find it hard to remember where the camera is, but she completely nailed it. And we get that cool kind of dancing. I think that bit is my favorite. And with all of this stuff, it's chance. So the fact that her hair made that shape, I wish I could have planned it, you know, but you just do a few takes and you hope that one of them, yeah, that's really cool. You hope that one of them is going to look right. And when you're running at that kind of frame rate, certain things are going to work, certain things aren't going to work. But this was actually for a hair salon who we work with quite a lot in our shoots. And, you know, that is awesome. For anywhere that is trying to sell you hair and beauty, that kind of thing, I think they might still have it on their website as their homepage because it just worked so well for them. Yeah, let's just have a quick look at the chat and see whether you guys have any questions. So we had the question about lighting, we addressed that, and question from Instagram. So how do you handle a situation where your model doesn't understand what you want them to do, and how do you avoid making a weird mood? Okay, that's a good question. I did just touch on that a little bit there, so we'll look at that a bit more. When you're working with an inexperienced model, the fact that they are there in front of a camera can already be a lot for them to handle. And as soon as you start to add in other things that you want them to do, it can be very hard to get them to do them in a natural and convincing way. On top of that, a lot of models will only have had experience, and maybe this shifts a bit now because people are doing more filming, but I would still say it's generally true. They have more experience of working with photographers than they do filmmakers. Now that is actually problematic because on these shoots, I don't need a model to give me 15 different looks every time they hear a shutter click. I need them to do one look really well, and that could be enough. Like with the Gina thing, that was all I needed. Do that, bang, that's the shot. But they will be used to standing in front of a camera and just shifting and doing different looks. And then they might get guidance from the photographer, but it means they don't particularly think about how they get from one look to another or one position to another. I mean, they might be able to do it, but they're not thinking about it as a movement. That can really kill the vibe. And I've had so many shoots where the model was great and they looked good and they kind of worked for some things, but they didn't sing. They didn't fill my heart with joy when they moved because it just wasn't quite natural. And you can try talking them through it, but sometimes it is just beyond the scope of what you are able to do at the time on the shoot with all the other pressures that you've got going on. Now, I won't name the brand and I won't name the model, but we did do a shoot where we needed a model to seem like she was very floaty and light, because it was for something to do with a very lightweight product. So we asked her if she could kind of move lightly, and these words come out of your mouth when the client says, "Oh, we need it to feel light and kind of floaty." And this hadn't been mentioned before, and I don't think the model was necessarily picked for that reason. Indeed, I think on that shoot the photography was the priority, so she had probably just been picked because she was a strong photographic model. And then you start to think about what you're asking that person to do. Being floaty and light, well, yeah, but how do you do that? What do you need to do with your arms and your head and your legs and your stride length and how you're landing in between steps? There's a lot that goes into actually selling a very lightweight floaty feel. I keep doing this with my arms. I'm going to have a sip of coffee. And that was a few years ago now, but it was kind of the nail in the coffin for me of not requesting, at the very least, they consider a model with some experience of movement. Now, I don't really mind what that could be. More often than not, it ends up being that they're a dancer. And that makes a lot of sense, because a dancer, a ballerina, will have spent years training specifically to do that. I remember when Black Swan came out, and a lot of reviewers and people who knew a lot more about ballet than I do said that Natalie Portman's arms, you could tell that she wasn't a professional ballerina who'd been doing it for years, because her arms didn't look light enough. And she did a very convincing job. As a layperson looking at it, I thought it looked fantastic, but the professionals could tell. And that just re-emphasizes that to do those movements isn't a trivial thing. You really need to know what your body is doing. And when you ask a girl on a shoot, just make it light, I wouldn't necessarily now expect someone to be able to do that, because thinking about it, it's very, very hard to do. Now, the counterpoint to that is that you can explain certain things, and you can explain pacing, and you can explain intention, and sometimes it's easier to go with those broad strokes than try and get into the real minutiae of what you want them to be doing. We do have a few more examples. Let's start skimming through. So we've done our hair shoot. This one. This one's actually great for pacing. So let's full screen this, and I will play it through to you. Okay, so this was for Rimmel. Latest line of self-tan shower products. And it looks kind of bright and high-key and happy and all the rest of it. That's the vibe that we're going for. Let's play it through. Now, when they did this, it was actually a advert for Snapchat. So it needed to be incredibly quick, and it basically needed to be able to be cut down to a couple of seconds. And that is challenging, because in this situation, the model has to do all of these things. We needed a shot of her grabbing the product. We needed a shot of it being squashed into her hand. We needed a shot of it being applied to her arms and her legs and her stomach. So with all of those different movements that we needed to get, we needed to know how quickly they were going to be done. And it really, really helps to think about that beforehand. So with this particular shoot, we did have a whole mood board of things and a storyboard for all of the different movements that we needed. And we did a couple of takes just practicing through how quickly she needed to do these movements, because you can't fake that so much in post. You can speed it up, but it can look a little bit weird. So if you can get the right pace with all your movements in camera, it really, really helps to sell this as a natural, organic flow when you're doing the edit. You can cut things hard, you can do all those types of tricks to make it fit in the 15 seconds, but if you can get it in camera the right speed, it's going to help you a hell of a lot. So that is the priority on that shoot, but there are other considerations here as well. So we're talking a lot about movement, and we will continue to talk about movement. And I should say, forgot to a moment ago, when I was talking about the dancers, and I said I don't necessarily exclusively want dancers. What I mean is, it could be any type of experience doing movements that you actually think about. Day to day, most people never think about what they do with movements. I personally, weird backstory of Dale here, have done a lot of training when I was younger, doing gymnastics. I did gymnastics for years and years and years. I am not any good at it now, but I did do that for a very long time growing up. And I also did a lot of karate, and I also did speed skating. Hey, bizarre fact of the day, I used to be a speed skater. I competed in the UK Nationals a couple of times. So I have trained for specific movements an awful lot, and that gives me a little bit of an appreciation of what you need to do to be able to move your body in a certain way and evoke certain feelings from your movement. So when I look at a model, they might be someone who's very experienced with yoga. Great, then they're doing movements and they're thinking about the poses that they end up in. They might do martial arts. That would be great, because then they are training to do specific things again and again, really precise, and knowing where their movement starts, ends, stops, and how they're getting in and out of it and into the next one. So anything like that, where you are repeatedly training yourself to do a certain move, is going to give you that awareness of your body, which will be really helpful as a model doing these kind of shoots. Now, you don't have to, as a camera person, filmmaker, cinematographer, know these things necessarily, but it does help to appreciate the limitations and why someone might be able to do that and why someone might not be able to do that. So let's cut back into this. We have, within this scenario just here, a lot of other things to consider, because as we skim through, yeah, there is the, let's full screen that for a second. That is the storyboard for this. So we can see we have ticked off all of those different things. Looks fairly similar to what we've got. We decided in the end not to have that on the floor because we wanted to see her face in the first shot, so we put it up in the shower. And that is that starting shot that we get to back here. Yeah. Now that shot is actually quite challenging. Imagine this. You're coming in and you have to grab this thing, but we want to see the branding. We want to be able to, as you take it with your hand down like this, see that it says Sun Shimmer, and we don't have time to spare. So it's not like we can hold on the frame too long as you walk up to it. We need it to be visible as you're grabbing it and taking it away. So it's incredibly difficult. With her offhand, she was left-handed, I think. So she comes up, she has to grab it from behind and kind of take it off. And it took quite a lot of takes just to get the movement perfect, to get the framing right so that we could still see her head. She was looking up, we could still see the product. We got a reasonably nice light on the product so that it was legible and all the rest of it. And all this time the client's watching. We had a little wireless monitor set up for them because it's a very, very cozy environment in a model situation like this where you have a shower and I've got to be in there with the water going and all the rest of it, and we got lighting coming in through diffusion into the room, and there isn't space for clients and agency in that room, so we have to run wireless out. Bit of people management there. So let's watch her do this movement. Very slick. Let's try that again. So we're coming through, skim back. Ooh, it's not liking that. It's because it's still playing. Yeah, so coming back like that. Great job of keeping her thumb out of the way and her fingers clear of all the branding there. Such a subtle thing, but I mean, damn, fair play to her for being able to manage to get that in the can, because I don't know if I could have. So from there, we move through all these shots. We need a nice shot of her, showing her putting it on. She is not naked. Everyone will be pleased to hear. We just did a damn fine job of making it look like she was, and we have some behind the scenes shots, skim through quickly, of that, so you will be able to see how we were managing this. Yeah, all of that good stuff. Okay, so she is in a bikini. Obviously, in this scenario, we aren't making the model get naked, but she is wearing very few clothes, and you've got to be sensitive about that. It's not something that I'm going to dwell on too much, although I will perhaps touch base with it on a couple of these shoots as we go through because it is relevant. So making sure they feel comfortable is important. And here's a really, really obvious one. As a cinematographer, or on this shoot, I'm operating the camera as well as setting up the lighting and things. So I'm kind of doing all of that with some assistants helping me. But it isn't my job to, if I see, for example, her hair's kind of come out of place, I'm not going to just reach in and change her hair. That isn't really cool to do. That's why you have hair and makeup there, and hair and makeup will have their own rapport, and they will be building that up with the model. And models will be very used to hair and makeup isn't exclusively, but again, vast majority of hair and makeup is going to be female, so they will probably feel more comfortable with them. And it isn't your place to get involved in that at that point. So I would say to the hair and makeup, oh, could we just adjust hair? In this situation just here, actually, she was actually someone who did a lot of yoga, and she'd been doing a lot of yoga. She had some little bruises on her knee, and one of the shots we see her leg. We needed to cover that up, so hair and makeup are watching the video village, and they can see that, and I'm there, and I'm going, oh, I think we might need a touch-up, so they can just come in and do the touch-up, make sure it looks good. So any situation like that where you do need the model to be wearing not many clothes, just make sure they're comfortable, and prior to them taking off their clothes, make sure that everyone's, you know, aware of how the shoot plays out and aware of where people are and where people aren't, so they have a space to get changed. Anyone who needs to be involved in that knows that they're involved in that. Anyone who isn't knows they don't go in that room. Those kind of things. Just general, you know, decency, good protocol. It really helps, and it means that you're not a creep, and no one wants to be a creepy guy on a shoot, you know. Because we are doing this every single day, we take it for granted, but I can appreciate young people coming into this who haven't worked around models a lot before. Suddenly, they are standing in a steamy shower with a beautiful Swedish model, and she's not wearing many clothes, and you're kind of getting really close. It's a bit of a weird situation, so, you know, keep your head, be cool, be calm, be courteous, all the rest of it. Just take it in your stride, and if you aren't sure on anything, just ask one of the other crew, so the hair and makeup, or the people who are dealing with the styling, and they'll usually be happy to jump in and help you out and make sure that everyone feels comfortable, because that's the most important thing. Let's cut back in. So through this, then we have, oh yeah, more touch-ups. This time around shoulder, around the top. Oh yeah, this is planning. So I mentioned we want to make sure everything's planned out nicely. Want to make sure that it's all kosher and everyone knows what they're doing, where they're doing it. So I'm chatting with Felicia just here in the back, and all the other agency and people on the styling side are in there, just going through their notes as well. Next up, oh yeah, okay. So having fun is fine, and you have to be able to have a joke, have a laugh, have a bit of fun with everyone. It is part and parcel of these kind of shoots. If you're doing this every day, you don't want to go into a situation where you are just doing things really sterile and boring. You want to have fun with it, and it's something that a lot of people, a lot of clients even say after coming on a shoot with us, wow, I didn't realize it would be so enjoyable. And you might be bubbling away below the surface and it's intense and there's tons going on, but always try to have fun with it. And people want to have fun, you know, they want to get a good job done. They want to be able to say they did their best, but they don't want necessarily just to do a boring, this is what I'm doing, this is my job. They want to get engaged with it, and it does help to build rapport. So her having a little bit of a mess around just here, when we're getting our colour chart in there, and just sticking out her tongue and stuff. It doesn't matter that she's sticking her tongue out, she's just having fun with it. So that's cool, you know, embrace it and just see if you can bring a little bit of that fun to them as well. And that means sometimes setting people at ease by, you know, putting yourself out there. So if you're going to ask someone to do something, maybe you do it first. Maybe you jump around like I was doing earlier and flap my arms. It helps to break the ice, and it means that they're not the only person on set who everyone's looking at, which can really help, especially with less experienced people when they are starting out and needing a bit of guidance. If you can do that, it gives them a bit of confidence to stand in front of everyone and do something similar. Let's cut back in and skip over to the next one. I'm just talking through here, but if anyone does have any questions, you know, just drop them into the chat, because I will literally talk all evening. Okay, this one is cool. And it comes back to that thing of what we're asking the model to do and how we're asking them to do it. So let's just full screen and play through. I'm going to have a sip of coffee while we're doing this. Yeah, so there's obviously lots of different things that we're bringing into this. And it's a little bit dreamy and light, and we're using the flare sticks to get a certain look, which is all hazy. We're shooting into the sun, and it's kind of fun. We're messing around a bit, messing around a lot. Now that isn't a shot from the final thing, but I thought keep it in there, because she had to get back to the other side of the bridge, and the scarf's all kicked around from where she was flinging it around before. So she just kind of, I don't know, Naruto run across the whole bridge just there, wearing that sort of Burberry cape, but it's all good fun. So the vibe here is important. What we spoke about earlier on, where we're trying to ascertain what the model is in relation to the camera, plays into this. So sometimes she's walking along and the camera isn't her point of interest. She's not looking at it, she's not paying attention to it. Other times she's looking straight down the barrel of the lens into the camera. Now, I always do like to mix up and get a couple of those shots on a shoot, just because it can give you something which perhaps you've never thought about for that particular shoot, and for social as well. It gives you things with a different vibe. So if you are doing something where you want, say, a story, well, guess what? If you're doing a widescreen shot and that's your priority for the shoot, and then you need to cut it to a story and you're vertical, it's a little bit challenging. But people's faces are vertical, essentially. So if you're doing a shot, maybe slightly wider than this, to be honest, because we wouldn't want to crop into like just our face like that. But if you're doing a shot like this, it's going to have a better chance of cropping to vertical like that. So it's nice to grab a few of them just looking down the barrel of the lens. For this shoot, I'm on an easy rig, so I'm moving around, and that interplay with the model is important. Now, sometimes it's really hard to direct a model and hold the camera and shoot and be able to get everything you need while telling them how you want it to happen. And that's especially true when I'm working on the big easy rig with the Ronin 2, because that thing is damn heavy. And if you're wearing it for an extended period of time, your concentration just is sucked into looking at the screen and being able to move this thing around and move yourself around and stay upright. It means that you perhaps don't have the same concentration to be able to say what you want that person to do. So as a general rule, I prefer to be using the easy rig with a camera sort of handheld at that point, you know, with a little handle on the top, strapped onto the easy rig, and I'm moving around. It's not stabilized, it's just taking the weight of the thing, but it isn't exactly handheld because it does give you a certain degree of pull against that string. But when I'm doing the bigger rig shoots, I don't like to try and direct at the same time. Sometimes I have, but it's just hard to do, and you find yourself not being able to talk as much because you're saving your breath for being able to move the damn thing around. So with this shoot, we are just skipping around Glasgow, getting as much as we can, dreamy vibe, her looking at the camera, her moving around different locations. This is actually for a shopping centre, and the shopping centre wanted this sort of vibey piece that you could really get a little bit of almost narrative from. It isn't quite as literal as it might be if we were just going down the route of, yeah, you're here, you're doing this, and you're in that actual real location. This is more dreamy, but I'm glad they did this because I think it kind of works. So direction that I'll be giving to her is just, I want you to move from here to here, and I want you to kind of skip along. I want you to just go nuts and keep looking back at the camera, but basically you're getting away from me. Don't worry if you lose me as you're walking along, because I'm going to go a bit slower. But every so often you're turning around, you're looking at the camera, you're flipping your hair, you're moving the cape. And then when we're in the field and we're doing stuff, I'm saying you're kind of looking off into the distance, dreamily. Helps to set a point for them so they can look at someone or something. And in that situation, going back to the eye thing, it can help them to move and look, and you want them to know whether they're looking up or if they're looking down, or if they're starting off looking up or down. You perhaps, as a filmmaker, should try this so that you're actually sympathizing with your model when it happens. Set up a camera and work out what different things look like. If you're being shot down on, work out how the movements look and work for that. If you're shooting up at someone can be really cool. It gives you a sort of powerful vibe here. We're sort of shooting up at her. But if you get really low and look up at someone, it can be a little bit unflattering. So you got to strike that balance between the really heroic low angle shot on a wide lens, super close, versus it being too much and kind of up their nose. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but experimentation will help, and getting to know your lenses also helps with this. So when you're working on a model shoot, the last thing you want to do is get a ton of shots and work out, actually, I was far too close on the 16, and all of these look a little bit weird. I should have been on a 50 further back, and that would help to isolate the subject, but it also changes the way their face looks. I'm going to touch on that actually because I've got a really interesting shoot that demonstrates this very nicely. Let's zoom out and go to this one. Now I am going to play the music actually for this, so have a listen. Now, I love so many things about that shoot. The models were great. Absolutely awesome models. They really knew how to move, and they were a lot of fun to work with. There are a couple of things to draw attention to technically on this, and one of them is that unlike the previous shoot we saw where I was on the easy rig, I'm on the ready rig with the Ronin 2 here, and I'm almost exclusively using a 50mm lens on this shoot. I did have a selection of lenses with me, and this was the first proper fashion shoot we did with this client, so I did take more equipment than perhaps I would have done if I'd known what I was going to end up doing. But I was stuck on that 50 religiously because it enabled me to move fast enough to get close and wide, and on top of that it really helped to separate the subject from the foreground and give you excellent parallax. So on that Ronin 2 you have awesome stabilization and you get really lovely parallax shift between the foreground and the background. Now there are a couple of shots in here where I am on 100mm. 100mm on a Ronin 2, it's tough. It's possible, you can definitely do it, but you need to be incredibly comfortable framing up and moving. So if it was on the vehicle rig, if we had this on the black arm and we were doing it like that, then I would say it's almost a no-brainer. Yeah, sure, go on 100mm, knock yourself out. On a gimbal, 100mm is much harder. Now I came up working on glide cams and that kind of thing, so I'm fairly confident with how framing works and how you're going to be able to move and keep things stable and keep things framed. And I did start off wide and work my way up to being confident on the longer lenses. But it gives you a feeling, a look, and it's like the, you know, that Bad Boys low angle, long lens, parallax whipping kind of thing, which is just so cool. You need the wider end to set context for this fashion stuff because it's very much about the locations we're in and they go to great lengths to choose those locations. But every now and then having a long lens shot in there is going to really, really help because it makes it all about the model. Sorry, complete frog in my throat just there. So let's skim back and have a look at how we're making the location. So here we're on a 50mm. Medium wide, sort of, I'm moving around, I'm still getting nice parallax, I'm able to get them both in shot. I'm not a quarter of a mile away from them to get them both in shot, which is important. If I was on a wider lens closer, it changes the relationship between them and the background, and also it changes the relationship between me and them because I'm much more in their faces. So this can actually help to alleviate some of that closeness, and certainly actually at the moment where you might need to stay further away from someone, I suppose. But it does give you a different look, and I like the look that it gives you. 50mm is pretty much now what I stick on. I don't go wider than that on any of these shoots because the aesthetic is right. When you go wider on your lenses and you get closer, it changes the way people look. Now that isn't because of the lens exactly, and this is a conversation for another video. This is a conversation for another live stream. Definitely need another sip of coffee before I delve briefly into this subject. The idea that the lens changes the look of the person is right, but it's more down to the relationship between the subject and the camera and how far apart they are. So on a wider lens, to get the same ratio of person as you have here in the shot, you have to get closer. And as you step through the focal lengths, you need to get progressively closer and closer and closer to get the same amount of person in the shot. Now, because of that distance to subjects change, you get a different feeling, a different look. The shape of the face seems to change. But it isn't because of the lens. It's a factor that is enabled by the lens. But it would happen to you as well. So if you take your eye and you put your eye close to something, then it takes on a different look because you're so close to it and you can see less far around their face. Or it changes their face to make it look longer because you're closer to the nose than you are the ears, and it's a really extreme change when you're that close. But it's the distance to subject that is doing this rather than the lens. But the lens enables you to see it, so it's kind of a circular argument, but that's the real technical reason behind it. And I do like to know why things are the way they are technically, especially when we're doing something like this, because working with models, working on fashion, you need to know how to get a certain look. And certain looks will require a wide angle. But a lot of the time you want that more beautiful portrait look and you want to separate them out. So 50 and above is what I'm sticking with for most of these. Let's skip through some of the other shots because there's some cool stuff in there. This I love. So when we did this, someone in the background just happened to walk down the steps. But my goodness, the timing was perfect. I wish that we had thought, let's do this, because it is just beautiful syncopation of timing. Now we do need to communicate with the person who is coming down the steps here. Goodness, I can't remember his name. Model just here, the only male model we've seen so far, and he was awesome. So he's coming down the steps, I'm moving behind the railings, and I need my movement to be timed with his progress down the steps. So we do a couple of takes with it. I tell him I need him to come down fairly fast, so you can see him kind of skipping down the steps. Jump, jump, jump. He's not stepping slowly. So knowing the pacing that you want, and knowing the fact that we're running over crank on this, that must be 50 or 60 frames a second, I think, on this one, means that you need them to be moving at a certain speed, otherwise it just feels sluggish. But having these foreground elements in there moving helps to give you a little bit of interest in the shot and make it a bit more exciting and sell lifestyle. So he's living in this house, he's got a fence, he's got sort of autumnal trees just here, he's got his Range Rover just there, he's got big steps coming down, and it's all moving, and he's centre framed, and he is the centre of attention, but there's other stuff going on, which is nice because it's less obvious, it's more lifestyle, it's a little bit more subtle than just bang in your face like we had with Gina right at the beginning. That's looking at the camera, really owning it. This is a little bit more removed, a little bit more voyeuristic, if you like. We're not able to get as close to him, and that's kind of cool. It works. We're getting a snapshot into his daily routine, into his life. Walking the street together. This is looking at the lens. She's looking at the lens. He's not looking at the lens. That shot, that was so difficult to do. I'm moving around, so I'm moving a long way, and we have to do this dance. So she's making a semicircle around this way, and I am kind of making the other half of the circle. So we need to very carefully choreograph what we're doing. And when I'm doing all of this, Rathika, who would be first day seeing with me on this, is kind of walking along beside me like a crab to try and make sure I'm not going to trip over anything, keep people out of my way, and just generally make sure the going is good for doing those takes. But you need to know exactly what you're going to do, otherwise you're going to step, I don't know, off a cliff or something. You need to be aware of your surroundings, and it's very easy when you're trying to get these long lens shots to fall over, step on something, trip over something. So do check yourself and make sure that you know what your movement's going to be. Right, let's cut in, and we're going to jump to another shoot now, which is actually the same brand. Well, I just thought, as I'm skimming here, I'm probably skimming the audio, aren't I? Yeah. Right, let's play this through, and we'll have the audio for that as well. So there's a lot of things that I really enjoy about this shoot. Before we go through those, there was a question which I hadn't seen on the chat just there. Again, fire your questions in. Anything about how we're working with models, techniques that you can be using, things that you should be aware of, just drop them into the chat and we will go through them and see what we can answer. So I have another question here. Do you find female models, especially not very experienced ones, are going to not feel comfortable or feeling comfortable when directed by a male director. Oh, right, okay. Do they feel comfortable with a male director? It depends on you as a person, really, to be brutally honest. And the crew around you, yes, that is going to have a bearing. So if it's just a load of dudes and you're all there and it's a very dude environment, then an inexperienced female model, maybe they're quite young, is going to have a harder time of it if they aren't super confident. You know, there are always people who are going to be able to deal with this kind of situation where they just go into it and they're just, yeah, I'm super confident, just go through it without any issues at all. But probably you're going to find that people are a little bit standoffish about it, and that is only going to be helped by the way that you conduct yourself on set. You've just got to put them at ease, just chat with them, be really friendly, just lay it out. You know, if you're doing anything which is a little bit risky, in terms of, you know, them being in fewer clothes, that kind of thing, or the way that you're asking them to move, or anything you're asking them to do that's going to be suggestive, then just talk to them. I don't want to say alone, but just talk to them where they're going to be comfortable, you know, not like in front of the whole crew where they're just going to have to say yes, because there will be that pressure just to want to make the shoot go ahead. Make sure they're able to say no to something is probably important. If you can have female crew members, that is always going to help. And I do really enjoy having a completely mixed crew for any number of reasons, but that way there's always a sense that the shoot is not going to go anywhere dangerous or not cool. If you've got a more mixed crew and you're conducting yourself in that way, it's going to help. So yeah, just be a good human, I think, is really the moral of the story here. Don't move their hair, adjust their clothes, anything like that. In certain situations, in a very extreme situation, you might be the person who does that because you're doing a fashion shoot, it's a spec shoot, and there's no one else there, and it's just you two, and they can't do something up. Maybe in that, if they have asked you, maybe in that situation, but just don't be too hands-on. Is basically a good rule of thumb. Keep saying that. I don't assume that you are creepy people, but it is going to be very easy to rep as someone who is a little bit too hands-on, and I have seen people on shoots where they're just too hands-on with everyone, like with guys, with girls. They're very hands-on people, but you could tell people are uncomfortable with it, and you kind of just got to say to them, "Oof, don't just move people. Ask them." If I'm moving, so I almost do this kind of weird thing where I kind of just tell them, I want you to go here like this, turn that way. It's a lot like guiding a plane in. If you can land a plane just with someone doing this, you can direct a model without having to, physically just move them to where you want them to be. So yeah, and that can be helped by acting out what you want. So just being able to give them a sense of the rhythm and the movement and all the rest of it. So going back to this, and I'm going to mute the audio because if I skim through, I'm probably going to get going on in the background. And there's a few things then to pick out. Working with models is one thing. Working with models with animals is another. This was fascinating, and anyone who follows Still Moving will know we've done a few shoots with horses. This one, I wanted the horse completely off leash, as it were, and the idea was that because the brand is Irish and these particular horses are from a particular area of Ireland, we wanted it to seem like the model was just kind of happening upon this wild horse and just sharing a moment, like communing with it. Now, they hadn't necessarily intended to do that, but the people who brought the horse along to the shoot were happy to try it. What they did say was, okay, we're in a fairly large area here, but it's all closed in, so the horse isn't going to disappear, and the horse will come back because it wants food and stuff. But if we let it off leash, we might not get it back for like 40 minutes, and that might mean that we can't get the shots because we were moving on to another location after this. So what we did was get all the shots that they needed first. Photographers getting their shots, they didn't need it to be roaming around free. And then because I wanted this really cool wide shot, I'll just skim this through here. So that, I wanted the model just approaching from a distance and us to be able to see like the whole field and the mountain behind and have grass around. I just wanted that. I had it as soon as I heard we were doing this. I just knew I needed this. And I chatted with the model before. We did this because we'd already done, I think with this, we'd already done 1 day shooting previously, and this was on the second day. So we'd had a chance to get to know the model a little bit, build up a rapport. And if you can speak to people before a shoot, it's always going to help, because then you get all of this out and arranged beforehand, so you know what everyone's expected to do on the day. Here, we didn't have a chance to do it before the shoot entirely, but we are spending a few days doing these shoots. So when we go back to the hotel, when you have your evening meal, you're just chatting and you're saying, oh, you know, that was cool. Tomorrow we got the horse. Are you happy? Are you comfortable? Because you don't want to put someone in a position where they might get injured, especially by a horse that's in the middle of a field if they're approaching it. Turns out that the model here, Jonah, she's Icelandic, and she used to ride horses, I think, competitively for Iceland. So she is completely at ease with horses, and she was thrilled that we were going to be getting a horse in the shoot, because she loves horses. So no problems there from her point of view, getting close to this horse and interacting with the horse. And I think because of that, she's confident, and the way she moved and the way she approached, you know, I wasn't telling her how to move here. She just naturally carries herself really well, and I'm just explaining the shot and what I want out of it. And when you get a really experienced model who is very confident and can carry themselves and knows how they're moving, you're not going to need to talk through every single movement. You can just tell them what you want and they do it. It's great. And here she just approaches, and then we cut into these close shots where she's like stroking the horse, and she's looking at the lens again. We're doing this lens thing, and then we're back to him, just kind of looking all soulful and stuff. But yeah, there are some other shots that we did where she's sort of kneeling down with the horse and her head's like next to the horse's head, and they used them for various different social cuts, and it was so perfect. Some of my favourite shots I think that we've ever got. And we're not doing anything for lighting here, we're just doing what Ireland gives us. Dog was not as good as the horse. That dog was problematic. Young dog. We've been talking about young inexperienced models. Young inexperienced dog who is there to be in the shoot. His handlers are there. Yeah, he was not feeling it, having to wander off over this way with the models being taken away from the owner, and then having to walk slowly back towards the camera. He sort of didn't like the cameras, and he'd just try and run off to the owners. Challenging. And we had to keep running the shot again and again, and we had to try and do some shots where he's sitting still. It's always difficult, and you're going to find yourself hankering after a human model to work with after you've been working with any animal. Except that horse. That horse was awesome. We'd do a shoot with that horse again in a heartbeat. It's going through. Okay, so Jace, I think his name was. He was awesome. Really photogenic guy, and just, you'd ask him to do something like, we just want him walking through the tall grass and movements and all of that, and he'd just hurtle through, just sort of like jumping and running over things, and he was really dynamic. I didn't ask him to do that, but once he started doing it, it became like a thing. His personality and the way the camera moved and what we were asking him to do, it all fed into that. So we've got some wicked shots where he's moving along, she's a lot more ponderous and thought out, and yeah, there. We noticed a rainbow, and I just said, quick, run towards the rainbow. And we just get this crazy shot of him running up towards this fairly faint rainbow. I mean, you know, rainbows are hard to capture. Thank goodness we didn't have a polarizing lens. Top tip, I don't think there are many people in the chat now, but with polarizing lenses, if you have a polarizer on, you might kill the rainbow. Turns out they kill rainbows. I found this out when I was doing a time lapse. A rainbow came up. I had an ND filter, which was a Vari ND, on the camera at the time, and I went back, thought, wow, I'm going to have an amazing shot of this rainbow forming in time lapse. It's going to be awesome. No rainbow at all. Completely killed by the polarizing filter. Rainbow light is very polarized light, and yeah, polarizing filters can just cancel it out. Anyway, he runs off towards that, and it's cool. And that's his character. That was just him. And then all the other shots where he's moving around, I just say, I just want a shot of you, because we want to be able to see the product and all the rest of it, and I just need you kind of looking moodily off into the distance, and that's what he did. Yeah, just leaping over things just there. That wasn't even part of the shot. We were just getting him walking along here, and then there was this trench, and he just leapt over it. I didn't ask him to do it because I wouldn't have wanted him to slip and get the clothes muddy. He'd probably been fine. He's a pretty athletic guy, but yeah, he could have slipped. But yeah, and then we used it because it's just crazy. He's just like bounding all over the place. So personality is something which you can't necessarily just drill into someone. The way that they carry themselves on a shoot is definitely going to play into how you shoot them. So yeah, don't try and squeeze them into your box all the time, because sometimes what they do is going to change what you do and feed into it and make it better. It's a collaborative process. And then we're just moving through, getting all these wicked splashing shots. In these situations, I'm saying, you know, I want you to really kick the water up. I want you to be moving through it because they need that kind of look for this. Shots where they're together, they're interacting, having fun. And that was them just, again, I don't even think we were particularly trying to get this shot. They just needed to get down the hill, and he just raced her down the hill. And this kind of stuff that's kind of human and real is a lot of fun. She had some grass, and she's just had it in her mouth, and I said, can we get a shot of that? And she's like, yeah, sure. And she's just looking at the lens, just smiling and laughing. And that got into the final thing, because it's just so awesome. Let's just full screen that so you can all fall in love with Jonah. Because it's just so genuine, and you can't easily fake it. I mean, really good actors obviously fake it all the time, but when you're on a shoot like this and you're trying to work quickly in fashion and just tell people what to do, it's hard to fake. So if you can get that rapport going where they feel comfortable just messing around and having a bit of fun with you, and know that you're not going to use anything that is to their detriment, and make sure that you're letting them know that, you know, hey, you know, we'll mess around with something, don't worry, you know, we won't use any shots where you look crazy, or but that kind of stuff is beautiful and it's wonderful, and I love it when it happens, and when you get that going, it's the best thing in the world. So yeah, then we just move through other shots on the shoot. There's a lot of functional with these shoots, and we always do need to balance that playing around with, we need these garments. The garments are the thing that we are selling. We're trying to create a lovely vibe around it all, but we need to get these shots technically. So here I'm quite low, I'm on the 50 again, I'm rotating around, she's looking down at me, backlit. It's not the most amazing shot in the world, it works. We're kind of killed a little bit by what the light's doing, and the fact that we only have a little tiny bounce with us, so we can't do all that much, but it works really nicely. And I've done a whole breakdown on this shot, so I won't talk about it anymore. But yeah, very cool. Gonna jump straight into another horse thing. Everyone will be aware of this, I imagine. This was a shoot we did on Black Arm, a equestrian shoot. We aren't really telling Laura how to act here. We're just saying it's going to be sultry, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be a little bit dramatic, it's going to be like sort of, I don't know, something out of a Jane Austen film, or you know, old English countryside, where the model, that the character that you're playing is riding out to see a lover or something. It's the end of the film, and finally they're about to get together, and you're just longingly hurtling along on your horse, and that was the vibe. So we had a lot of talk about that beforehand, and I knew exactly what I wanted out of it, and I was just trying to, through mood references and mood boards and talking with Laura. And we're going to do a live stream, actually. We're going to do a live stream next week on Instagram with Laura, where we talk about this process. So if anyone's interested in that, just check out, we'll be promoting it on Instagram. It'll be really cool. If you're watching this in the future, you might probably miss that, but we might have it on Instagram TV, so check that. So in this situation, we're just talking about what she needs to be doing in her face, how she needs to be looking, but then she's got to concentrate on riding the horse as well, so obviously there's a balance there. But the vibe was kind of hammered out with mood boards, and mood boards are an incredibly potent tool for you. So when you're doing model shoots, you need to be looking at films and TV and fashion films where you can see what models are doing, analyze it and say, that's what we need. It might be completely unrelated to what you're doing, but here, for example, there was a slight element of Westworld about the way she's riding the horse and stuff. And I just said, you know, have you seen Westworld? She's like, yeah. So, you know, when Dolores is like riding the horse along, she looks all powerful like this. I was like, I want that. So she knows what to do. And it turns out, you know, roughly you're going to look like that when you're riding horse. You're not going to be hunched over like this and stuff, or you're going to be lying down and like this. And there are certain shots where I said, I just kind of want you lying sort of almost fingers in the mane, just along like this. And we all know these references from classic films. So being able to draw on that, show it to your model, explain to them how that's going to work and how that's going to fit and how you're going to edit it and what it's going to be is really important. And in this situation, she does quite a lot of that herself, but it's a team effort to make it work. And with everything, you're not always going to get it necessarily exactly how it is in your head. And it's about tempering that and knowing, okay, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe we can adjust it slightly. Maybe the angle that I thought would work at a low angle doesn't work. Maybe we try a higher angle, a longer lens. Being able to visually explain yourself and say to the crew, if there's crew around you, we need to switch out to another lens. We need to move further back. We need to get that light over this way. Just so you can work quickly and acknowledge that things might need to change, basically. I'm going to touch on something risky just here, actually. So with this shoot, she's wearing a very skimpy dress. I'll just have a quick skim into the chat. Do you tend to shoot overcrank on all of your fashion shoots like this? A lot of the time we do, because it's about the clothing and it's about a certain dreamy vibe. But that's only generalizing where it's more lifestyle. Certain shoots we actually actively shoot, real speed and make them a bit edgy. Like the Gina one at the beginning, that was real speed, actually, I think. So it depends on the vibe that we're going for. If we're going for something edgier, or we're going for something which is entirely more narrative. So think, fashion, I'm going to make a whole video, or maybe do a live, I don't know, on fashion films that I love. The Tale of Thomas Burberry is an amazing film about the brand. So that isn't overcrank for the vast majority of it, because it's all narrative and they're actually talking. But then for certain bits where Sienna Miller, maybe, was it Sienna Miller, is like throwing up the Burberry cape, which was actually the reference that we had for that shoot in Glasgow. You know, it's that Sienna Miller thing with the cape walking along over the bridge in The Tale of Thomas Burberry. That's overcrank, but then the majority of it isn't. So it depends on the vibe we're going for. A lot of the time, yeah, we do shoot overcrank because that's going to give us a more dreamy vibe, but it isn't always a given. Going to deal with one more question. Cool fact about the rainbows and the polarization filters. Yes. What day will the Instagram live stream be? I'm not sure off the top of my head. We've been organising it. I think that it's on Tuesday. But we'll definitely be promoting it on our Instagram. So do check in there and we'll have it like all over the place so you can see that it's coming up. Put that down for a second. Risky is where I was. She's wearing a really skimpy dress. She's not able to wear a bra under that. This is real talk now. Okay, this is real talk. Was comfortable with this. Sure, she was comfortable with this. We'll ask her in the Instagram chat if she was comfortable with it. But we've worked with Laura tons of times. She knows us. She knows we're cool, and we're not going to use anything that perhaps is compromising. She knows we have her back on that. So she is in this situation where she's riding along, and the dress is flying around everywhere. Now, this situation meant that we had to very quickly make an adjustment after, I think it was the first proper run that we did, or maybe it was the second run. We got some tape for her, and she just used some bits of tape to hold the dress down a little bit, smacking the mic just there. But that's something that's going to happen. You know, it's just things like this where you're doing lots of movement. Yes, garments can move, and people are going to be wearing things which are revealing. So stuff like that's going to happen. I did sort of, she was aware that it was happening as she was doing the run. And I just said, look, don't worry. I'm not going to skim through this footage, and, you know, I'm not looking through all of the B-roll shots here. I actually got, I said, we'll get one of the girls in the team. Girls? Hey, girls in the team, if you're watching. I'm sure you'll love being called girls. One of the ladies in the team, I think it was Rathika, and I said, look, I'll get one of the ladies to look through the footage and just chop out any bits and put them in a bin, so that, you know, if there is anything there, you know it's taken care of. So she was happy with that. It's like you do what you can to set people's minds at ease, but at the end of the day, we're not going to use anything that's compromising. And there's this fine line, I think, in fashion between when I'm looking at something, and this is going to sound a little bit like you know what you want out of it for it to look kind of slightly. If anyone has seen Boogie Nights, it's like sexy. We want to make it sexy. I want to do it a little bit more sexy. That whole thing that he does with his speech on how he's going to try and, he's got an idea for how he wants this. We know what we want visually, and we know why we want people to be in certain poses. It's to evoke a certain feeling. So sometimes you do want it to skirt on the edge. And nudity isn't necessarily anything to shy away from. We don't really do it. But in the right place, in a narrative context, yeah, nudity is fine. But not for any of these kind of films. It doesn't really play a part in anything that we're doing. So when you're approaching that, you do know that you want things to be on the edge of revealing. That's the whole vibe. That's the whole kind of, she's riding off, if we're going with that sort of narrative thing, Jane Austen-y thing of her galloping off to see, I don't know, Mr. Darcy or whatever at the end of the film, and it's all hair flying and dramatic and sort of like dress flying. It is that kind of yearning vibe that you're going for. This is getting deep. This is just the psychology behind the kind of shots that I want to see, obviously. But when you're approaching it, that's what you've got to sort of deal with. You've got to deal with that balance of, well, we need that, but we don't want the model to feel exposed. Just chat through it with them. Make sure they know what the goal is. Make sure they know that that isn't the goal, and we're going to stay on the right side of tasteful with it, but it has to have that frisson of edge about it. Otherwise, everything just becomes really bland and not risky. Now, skimming on, probably gone on, oh my god, I've gone on for an hour and a half again. Look at that. I'll wrap it up. We're nearly at the end of these things. So we have shot all over the world, obviously saw all of those different places and worked with lots of different people. Every shoot is different, and the way that we approach different shoots with different models, it's always got to have a certain rhythm to it. And I want to just finish off with a couple of studio shots just here, because this is lit and we are controlling things. Just going to check what day, Instagram, yeah, we've got that. So when we're doing these shots, it's all about the mood and the movement and the turning to camera. And that yearning look, I've just spoken about it, so it kind of fits in quite nicely. The model here is looking direct at the camera, and she's just sort of slightly longingly looking, and it's out of focus, it's really close, really intense feeling. And she's just enveloped and framed by all of this. So when I was talking to her, I was saying, I want you to look, but you're slightly off, and you don't always hold that gaze. You can let it drift off, away. It's almost dreamy, just sort of vibe to it, where you're just sort of closing your eyes and going off. And there's another example of this where we're shooting in LA. Just pull up that timeline quickly, because I think it would be cool just to jump into that one quickly. And we were working with Brittany, where are you, Brittany? Now I needed something out of this shoot to make it feel right, and that was actually got by going overcrank to the extreme. So I went to 120 frames, and I just said, what I want you to do. And we're in the middle of this park, and we've been conversing, chatting online, and working out what we're going to shoot. But I just met up with Brittany's, I think we met in Beverly Hills Hotel, really iconic place just there, and we're just outside on all the boulevards. So we kind of chatted through what we're going to do, working up and down there. And then I said, let's go over to that park where we can get a little bit more shade and we can get a bit more distance with some trees and things in the background. And all I want you to do is just close your eyes and kind of just nod off and do it for a while. And it's important to do this kind of thing where you can give them like almost an exercise to do. So she's just closing her eyes, and I said, just like focus on your breathing and just kind of nod off, and then just move your head slowly around and then open your eyes. And it gives you this sort of moment of meditation. And when you run over crank on it, it can really make it feel soulful. It's a bit like the hair shoot at the beginning where the model's moving, but more focused on just that dreamy state. So I'm going to play it through for you. So full screen this, cut to that. So we're just getting that sort of thing where she's just almost nodding off, and it interplays really nicely with the other shots that we're getting here, which, going back to the overcrank thing, these shots are mostly not overcrank. So we've got little bits that are, little bits that aren't. Some of them have that slightly frenetic feel. I think I might have maybe brought that back up to speed. So maybe it was 50 to start with, but I wanted that contrast between the dreaminess. Now, it took a little bit of time to actually get Brittany in the right space for this. We were working a lot with it. I wanted the shades on because I needed that vibe for the shoot. And it was really sunny, and I kind of wanted to make sure we didn't have any harsh shadows across her eyes and that kind of thing. So having the shades really helped, but we did a few shots where she was just too dramatic, taking them off. And not her fault, you know, she was just sort of whipping them off like this. And I kind of spoke to her a bit and said, I just need you to be moving a little bit slower with that. And as you're taking them, just be sort of looking down over the top of them. So again, we're thinking about movements, we're thinking about where her hand is, we're thinking about how her head's moving as she's going through this. So she's moving her head down, pulling the shades down, so you can start to see her eyes before you would see them with her doing that. This movement can be a little bit sterile. It's just like, look at the camera, look all sultry, and take off your glasses. It doesn't have anything about it. But as soon as you're sort of more like this, and it's not going to work for me. I'm not Brittany, and you're bringing your head down and you're twisting your shoulders, and there's a little bit of wind and it's kicking in your hair. It gives it more life. So synchronizing all of these different aspects really helps to sell it. And this dreamy shot is just like a bonus that just feels so fun, so awesome. Yeah. So these shots took a little while to get. They're really simple, but just being able to get your model to do the kind of movement that you want at the speed that you want, with the intent that you want, takes time, and you need to guide them through it. You need to constantly be talking to them and say, don't knock their confidence, say that was rubbish. You know, you're gonna try and make it a nice experience for them. So say, oh, that was cool, let's try it again. And what I'm looking for, I was just in slightly the wrong place. I just need to go down a bit. And if you can move your head down as you do it, so you ease them into the kind of space you need them to be in, and it's not constantly, no, wrong, do it again, no, wrong, do it again. And here we're really low, looking up at her, and even though she's got the shades on, she's looking down at us as we're moving. So I was just telling her to walk along, kind of move around, and we'll just do a few takes of it. We'll get into a bit of a rhythm, and as we're moving, she's going to start off, she's moving too fast. So she's catching up with me. I'm walking backwards, holding the Ursa. I'm not on a steady cam or anything with this, so I am just handheld. And it takes a bit of pace judgment to work out how fast she's going to move, how fast you're going to move, and just gradually get into that. It's like slow down a little bit, just a bit slower. Okay, try that again. Work out how close you need to be to get these shots. Work out how quickly you can walk backwards without the shot going all over the place, because that's going to play into this as well. And then these shots as well, just slightly dreamy, slightly longing, lips apart. Again, it's something to think about when you are doing these shoots. How does your model move their face? And as she's doing this just here, you can see she's just subtly moving. That's really slow motion again. She's tilting her head down. All very cool. I think we probably better wrap up this live stream. So I'm going to have a quick look at the chat, check if there are any other questions. I don't think there are. I want to do a few more of these, and I'm open to suggestions about what you are all going to find interesting. Now, I am, at the same time as doing all of these lives, obviously doing a lot of work on other videos. So I've got the 60-second cinematography series, I've got the longer form breakdowns that we're doing, I've got the behind the campaign videos. So there's a lot of content which we're pushing out on YouTube. The reason I like the lives is because they can be a bit more interactive. People can ask questions, and I can address things as we go. Also, it kind of makes it easier for me on certain things just to talk about it, and then I don't have to edit it down afterwards, and I'm not trying to make it a super concise 60-second thing. I'm just able to elaborate and go at length. On top of that, YouTube hopefully pushes live content a little bit harder, so it's good for the channel to be able to do these lives, and I do want to keep doing them if that's the case, because I'm happy doing lives, and you know, it can be an enjoyable experience, something everyone can get something out of. My thinking, and I'm open to suggestions on this, is that I would like to explore working with people more. The working with models one we've done a bit of here, but I want to look at working with other people. So it might be working with actors. So odd delineation perhaps to make, but where we're doing adverts and things, we're not working with models in the same way as we're working with models for fashion, working with actors who are doing a particular scene and having to do that repeatedly, and it's all kind of storyboarded out and scripted and that kind of thing. So working in that environment is very different, and also in that environment we have the added twist sometimes of working with children as well. So I thought it would be interesting to do a segment on working with actors in a commercial space and working with children, because there's a lot of shoots where I think people find it very hard to get what they need, especially with children, because you've got to encourage them without being too hard on them, and you've got to really guide them through all of the things they need to do so that you get the take you need. You don't stress out the kid, and it all looks good, and everyone's happy, and you know, client's happy, and you're getting the right shots. So that's one thing. And also kind of similar tack again, working with professionals. So where you are perhaps working with a sports person, or working with people who are doing a particular movement because it's what they do. So my thoughts would instantly go to a shoot we did with a blacksmith. So he's not a model, he's not an actor. We're filming him do what he does professionally, and he's going to be able to do that, and he knows what he's doing, but we're still having to work out shots and guide him through how we need him to do certain things. But it's a different ask at that point. The same with sports people as well, because they are doing what they would naturally do. You do need to say, if there's a few examples we have of working with snowboarders and skiers, you need to be able to explain to them where you're going to be, what the camera angle is, what the movement's going to be, and how they're going to be doing whatever it is they're doing. Maybe they come down, they do a turn, they kick up some snow. Well, they need to know where they're going, where they're turning, where they're going after that, so they're not going to collide with you, all the rest of that. If they're doing tricks, they need to be able to judge where they're landing, judge where the camera's going to be, judge how fast they're going to be hitting that. You need to judge how fast they're going to be hitting that so you can get the movement right. So it's a different kind of thing that you're doing. You're not necessarily working in the same way as you're working with models, but it's very related. So those are my thoughts for another couple of lives that we could do. Now obviously we can do different things on lighting or product or any number of different editing based things, or things where I analyse people's footage, and have put out a call recently if anyone has any films that they would like me to look at. And I'm thinking more at this point in the commercial space, or perhaps in the fashion space, things that are relatively self-contained, small things, not longer short films. Then I'll look at it, maybe analyse lighting, if that's a relevant thing to analyse in that particular piece, or analyse the way that it comes together as a whole video. That could be how the music integrates, how the editing is, how the colour grading is, any of those different things. And that could be fun to do as a live as well, because then people could jump in and talk as well about how they were working on things in the chat. So I'm open to suggestions. Those are my thoughts. It's been fun for me just to sit here and talk about this stuff. I love looking at the shoots that we've done and how we have worked on them. I find it interesting to talk about. I hope that you find it interesting to listen to, and I'm more than happy to look at any of this stuff in more detail. If you want breakdowns on certain things that we've looked at here, I might do a 60-second cinematography on it. I might do a longer form video on it. There are actually some longer form videos for some of these shoots, like the Rimmel shoot, on our YouTube already, so you can skim through and find them. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm going to kill the live stream there. I'm going to leave you playing out with Brittany and call it a night. Take it easy.